Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Ask me almost anything. This is number 23 in this series, although it's just today's main questions are going to be all about software, format, process, technical things, copyrights, stuff like that. Usually I am here every Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to walk you through the step-by-step screenwriting project, but every week I try and take a day off to just catch up on some of the questions that have come to me through emails. If you are not watching me live and you would like to ask a question, this is your lucky day. You can still ask me a question, even if you are not watching this live. Just go to writingforscreens.com and push the Contact Me button. Click on that. It will open a window that lets you write me an email, and you can ask a question that way. If for some reason you hate emails or hate my website and you want to just ask me a question here upon YouTube, put it in the comments. That will come to me in the form of an email, and then I will know that you've got a question to ask. If I can, I will answer it right then and there. Sometimes I also answer it here. Hello, Marital. I need help with your name, so tell me if I'm getting it right. Maritalatoso. Anyway, hello for you too. Hey, good to see you. Let us get into it. We've got a bunch of things to talk about today. The first one is, what software do you use? I've had this question a couple of times. It's partly a result of people looking over my shoulder watching when I do the live stream. I work in a couple of different softwares. The main thing I need to talk to you about is how much software does not matter. Software is, it depends on your computer, it depends on your brain, it depends on your budget. Lots of things influence what kind of software you should use. I discuss this in detail in this video. It is 35 minutes of action-packed discussion of exactly how to format a script, which you can do without screenwriting software. You can do it just in word processing. And since screenwriting software can be expensive, I say if you're just starting to learn screenwriting, do it. Is it a little bit slower? Sure. Is it a lot cheaper? Yes. Hello, Larry. Hello, Rachel. No problem. I will just go with it. Cool. So anyway, we are discussing software. And the first thing you should know is the best software is the one that you can use easily and cheaply and reliably. That is the best software. Almost everything that I do on the live stream, I am doing in word processing. Just my outlines, my notes, all that stuff, that's just in plain old word processing, and I use an Apple computer, so I use their built-in word processing software called Pages. However, the styles are what matter. In other words, when you can format different paragraph styles, which in the outline I do a lot of. Let us take a quick look at the outline. All right. So here we go. So in this case, here in the outline, I am just using Pages, and you can see up here I have choices that I have pre-formatted different formats to make them distinctly, like each format is a different kind of thinking for me. One is the scene itself, the name of the scene. I try and make that a description of the central action or some reminder of the center of the scene for me. This is key, by the way. All this stuff is what works for you. No one is looking. No one cares. There isn't a right or wrong thing. So anyway, The point is, I'm using, when I do this stuff, this is just word processing, nothing fancy. Just set yourself some styles that you like, which I describe in detail in this. Hold on. I'm just going to remind you, this wonderful video on my channel talks a lot about it. But when I am working in the script, I work in Final Draft. I don't know what LibreOffice is, but it sounds free, so I like it. Hello, Gene. Okay, so the deal is, with screenwriting software, there's a bunch. Final Draft is mostly the industry standard. If you are working for professional companies, most of them use Final Draft. Some of them, I believe, use something called Movie Magic. Also, this may change. It may constantly change. The reason that they do it is the idea everyone should be working in the same software so they can pass documents back and forth. And some of these softwares integrate with others so that you can take a Final Draft document and run it through the production software and break out your schedule and your budget. So they like that. They, the people who are making these things. Writers, doesn't matter. But you want to do what they want if you are working enough with them to make it worth the hundreds of dollars. I can tell you, I wrote scripts in word processing on the Apple computer. It was called something else back then, before Pages. Anyway, until I started making money at screenwriting, and there was a reason to learn a new software, I just did it the way I did it. There are lots of nifty features, page breaks, automatically going from one format to the next. There's lots of cool things now. Final Draft has got all sorts of storyboarding, story beat breakdown into note cards, lots of great stuff. I personally like Final Draft, but I do not want you to think that you can not write a script if you don't have it, because it costs a bunch of money. And also, it takes a while to get used to it. So when you're starting with a new software, instead of fluently getting your thoughts onto the page, you're struggling to just type. And what you want is whatever you're most familiar with using, whatever you can quickly change the format as you need it to get your ideas out. Because the whole point is, whatever software you're using, you want it to be invisible to your brain. You want to be thinking in terms of the words, not how you format them. That's the thing. The most important thing is, whatever software you use it a lot. Practice with it. Get so familiar with it and so intimately able to use its functions that you don't have to think about it, because that is the key to software. The point about the software is it won't write for you, so therefore you just want it to play the song in your head. You want whatever is in your head to be able to come out fluently in the form of writing. That is the key. Okay, this OpenOffice article made. Okay, cool. OpenOffice, neat. The main thing is, that is why actually I personally actually do most of my writing in a software called Scrivener. Scrivener is for large prose documents and research when you're breaking it up into a whole bunch. It's very, very, very ornate and complicated. It is like a 747, a major jetliner. 747 dates me because that's an old type of jet. But the point is, it's got a lot of options. You can format and set out your document in all these different ways. It took me like 2 years to get comfortable using it. That was a few years ago, so now I use it all the time because I am comfortable and it helps me to write down what I am thinking. It is not necessary. It's good, but I have to warn you, if you're going to use Scrivener, you're going to have to take a long time to be able to set it up the way you want to, because everything is adjustable, and to learn how to use it. They have great tutorials. I recommend Scrivener if you are a person who is writing a lot of long, complicated documents. It's a nifty thing, but it takes a long time to learn how to use it. Likewise, even Final Draft, until you get used to it, it will actually slow you down. So that is my main thought on software. Word processing for anything that's not a script. Just keep it simple. Format the styles that you like, that make sense for you. I have offered my feelings on format in that video. Okay, so that's that. Mr. Ninja Turtles, Marat Latoso. Oh, Latoso, I see. Marat Latoso. Okay. Asks just one of those back in my day questions. How was it before computers? Passing around photocopy pages? Yes, exactly. Before computers, it was back when I was starting out, you had a typewriter and a bunch of pages. And you had to type. And if you wanted to make a change, and this is true, it discouraged rewriting because you had to retype everything from there on. Or what they would do is you would start to do, like, if the page that you rewrote was a different length than the page it was replacing, if it was short, you would just leave the bottom of it blank. And if it was long, you would run over to an A page. So you'd have like page 21. And if your new page 21 was longer than your old page 21, you'd do 21A. And then that would go like a quarter or half a page. And then you would go to 22. It was dumb. It was not, computers may be responsible for the downfall of civilization in many ways, but they sure make writing easier. So I am a fan, actually, of that. And then, yes, you would have to take your precious script to the copy store, and they would run off copies for you. All right. So the next topic, while we're on the formatting kind of thing, I had a question which was actually interesting. It's kind of two parts. E2 asked me, I noticed you don't number the scenes in the outline. Is there a reason for this? And there is. There is a very good reason. Hold on. Here we go. All right. Numbering. In a script, if you read a professional script, you will sometimes see that they have scene numbers, which goes into that thing about A pages and extra pages and stuff. You will see scene numbers. Don't do that. Don't write that in your script. It is annoying and useless for a reading script. The only reason that anyone numbers a script is because they are going into production and they are going to shoot the scenes out of order. So they can't just say page numbers. They have to say, I'm going to do this scene at the farm and that scene at the farm. They're 20 pages apart. So I'm going to say scene 15 and scene 42. That's today's shooting. So you need numbers. You don't want to say all the farm scenes. It's just easier to know what pages you're talking about with scene numbers. That is only when you are doing a production. Until then, everything that you guys are going to be writing is just a reading script. And you want it to be as free of clutter as you can possibly make it. That is my main take on formatting, on writing style. You are trying to create an experience where they are reading for pleasure, where they are reading about the story and the characters, and they are not distracted by production issues or descriptions of how the movie is going to be made. They want to believe that the characters and the situations are unfolding on the page. That is where you want to get your reader. You don't want them to be thinking, oh, this will be a cool shot, or oh, that's a great sound effect. You want them to be in the world because then they say, I love this story. I love these characters. And then they want to make the script. So you do not want to do anything in your format to distract from the reality of the story in the moment. So numbers, not a good idea. But actually, E2 was asking me about the outline. And the question there is, why don't I number the outline scenes? And the answer is, I don't really need to. Unless I wanted to know how many scenes I had, there's no real advantage to numbering because they're in the order that, I write, as I've shown you, I put my outline in word processing. So it is linear. You have to read from the first line to the last line in order. There are some people who outline in other software, like I know that a bunch of people outline in spreadsheets. Not a fan of this because it keeps you from seeing it in a linear sense. It can be cool, doing multiple storylines, whatever, but overall, the experience of the script and of the show or movie is linear. You are going through it moment to moment, and you have no choice about what direction you're going in. So therefore, putting things in that order helps. And once they're in that order, you don't need numbers. Numbers, once again, only serves to make you alienated from the flow of the story. And that is what I am trying to emphasize for you. The flow of the story is the writer's main job. The main thing you were trying to do is make people want to know what happens next, to care about the people in the story. They're made up. They only exist beyond the page, so you want to do everything you can to keep the reader's mind there, and everything you can to keep the writers off the page, or outside of the page is even worse. So that is why I don't advise numbering scenes, and the bigger philosophy about trying to have as little clutter on your page or in your document or in your work at all as you possibly can. Try to keep yourself seeing the story, the people, their lives, their needs, their problems. That's what you want to be focusing the script on. So then there's still more formatting questions. And this question I've answered it a couple of times, but I did want to answer it again here because you just never know. It is an interesting problem. Elenue Genli wrote, "There is a moment near the end of my story where two scenes need to play out at the same time but in different locations. I've seen that in movies before, where this is done by cutting back and forth between the scenes. So my question is, how do you write that?" And that is a good question and a good problem. It's first of all, it's good to think that way. To think, yes, you are intercutting between places. That tends to create often a sense of tension. So that's really good. But how do you write it? The simplest way possible, and once again, the way that keeps the reader flowing through it, which is you simply do, and I will show you here in our document, our script. Okay, we're gonna zip down to the end of this and then put this after the end. So let's interior, shack, swamp, night. Okay, so the voodoo person waves his flaming torch. Okay, then exterior, highway, truck, the same time. Evelyn drives toward the swamp at top speed. Let's just move this down to the next page so we can see it. Okay, so then interior, shack, swamp, the same time. Screaming for vengeance, the voodoo person puts the torch to the picture of Evelyn. Okay. You may be able to tell I am making this up as I go along. The same time. Okay, so here we have a sequence where we're going back and forth between this person casting a spell on the other person who's driving. Um, and it's real simple. Just go back and forth between the things, describing the incidents as they would show up in a linear form, because that's how you're going to see them when you intercut them. It's real simple. It's fun to say how little you have to think about format or anything else. You just have to tell the story, the way that the flow of action is happening in the two places, and how you are tracking. He does this, it has that effect there. Then she does this, and it frustrates him there. Whatever it is that you're doing with, it's still a story. It's still cause and effect, or potential cause and effect. You know, maybe something down the line is going to happen. But it was cool to watch what you typed to. Oh, gosh darn it. Pablo, thank you. Okay, that's I wish I had read that a while ago. Yeah, okay, so here's the deal. This is what I typed. Let me show you so you can watch this. Okay, so, you know, I wish there was like a hand wave button or like an alarm bell, like, Glenn, you forgot to share your screen. Okay, so what we got here is interior location, first location, and then you do an action or a speech. They're talking, it's whatever it is, and then at the same time, another location, and you just say the same time. You don't say continuous, because continuous implies that the action is continuing from the person who is doing it in the last scene. So that would be continuous to this person. You're saying it's at the same time. It's a minor detail and no one will really have a problem with it. But if you're saying continuous, you are saying this action is continuing. The voodoo person is now going to go out to their boat, whatever it is. By doing the same time, you are saying to the reader subliminally, it's a different place, but it's the same time. And you're saying that in plain English, so that's nice. Hey, Irite. Oh, that's, you know, I'm going to show them. Building suspense. No, I was not building suspense. I was messing up because it would have been more suspenseful to see me type this at the time and not watch me go, ooh, I'm typing. So yes, thank you, Pablo. All right, so then you do the action, and this could, you know, this could be a whole scene. You don't want to do these too long, because if you're intercutting and you take a long time in one place, you forget you're intercutting. But you can do it. I mean, in theory, you could do a nice long scene and then cut back to the other thing. Generally, when you're doing two things at the same time, you bop back and forth pretty close. Anyway, the point is, for each change of place during this time, you put a new scene line. Then you just describe what's happening. And that's the whole deal. You got it? That's how you do it. And then you delete it. So that is how you do two things happening at the same time, or intercutting. It's actually, the answer is as simply as possible, as clearly as possible, to let the audience follow the flow of the story. That's really the point. That's the magic game we're playing. Okay, now we're going to turn to really legalistic stuff. How much do you have to change if you're using a real person's name or story? Now, I've actually gotten a bunch of these, so I'm going to read you several of these examples of this problem. So the first one is Albert. He said he's writing something about a person on YouTube who does lectures on philosophy, although he is an example of a philosopher. The word philosophy is getting thrown around a little easily lately. Opinion. Anyway, point is, so he says, I'm not familiar with these type of words. So his lines are basically a ripoff of this real person's YouTube videos and lectures. I would consider changing some words here and there. How much do you think I have to change the words before you can use a real person's words? Similar, Alex said, another person named Alex said that he had read a story online on Reddit of something that happened to someone, and he really wanted to turn it into a short film. And he related, it worked well for him, and he understood the story. Other than, and this is not a famous person, it was just somebody talking on Reddit about their life. So the question was, no one's going to know except that person that it's a real story. And you're not identifying that person. So is it okay to use their story? And then next, Maritalatoso is asking about names. I'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about people's stories or words. Let's talk about using other people in your story, and where the legal line is. The first thing you must know is I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. I do not want you going out there, ripping off somebody's life, getting it made, and having them sue you, and you say, Glenn said it was okay. First of all, I'm not saying it's okay. I actually don't think it's okay. I think it's not okay. I don't think it's okay to use real stuff unaltered or only slightly altered, because it's not yours. It's just that your job is to make your version, your creative rebirth of this stuff. And so my answer would be, aside from the legal issues, creatively, why are you not making it more original? Why are you not making it more yours? Changing it to relate to your life. If you happen to read somebody's story and it's exactly like your life, then just forget their story and write yours. Okay? But even if you're writing about your own life, I would really think about, the famous Thomas Wolfe story. He had to write a whole book called You Can't Go Home Again, because he literally couldn't go home again after he wrote his first novel. He wrote his first novel about his hometown in North Carolina, and it became a bestseller, and everyone in the town was like, how dare you write about us? So there's your answer. If you are going to write your real story in a real sense, just write a memoir and say, this is real. Cool. But if you're making it into a story, work with it, twist it, invent it, find the creative power that would make it even more how it should be, because you're going to have to anyway. When you fictionalize something, you start to have to compress and heighten and do all this stuff. And once you're messing with it, really mess with it. Really make it the strongest fictional version it can be. If you want, like, I once wrote a story about a self-help guru. And this self-help guru had a breakdown and tried to kill his wife. So the point is, I had to make up his self-help philosophy in order to have something for him to talk about. But also, in doing that, you are revealing their character. So when you talk about someone's political philosophy, if you're just taking something that's in the news, find out what it means to the person as a character. Unless you're doing a story about political philosophy, if you're doing a story which is an argument of philosophy, learn the philosophy. Don't just quote somebody. Actually learn it and put it into your words. That's really important. There's a really great political philosophy old movie called 7 Days in May. It's a political thriller about the military trying to take over the government in the 1960s. It's just really well written. It's Rod Serling, Twilight Zone guy, adapted this novel. It was a political thriller novel, 7 Days in May. It's talky, it's old, but the talk is cool, it's smart, and he's found a way to give an emotional underpinning to what is truly an arguments over political philosophy. anyway, the answer is, even then, the people who are arguing politics are also in a story, and you need to care about their personal reasons, their personal conflicts. Unless you're going to do like a real intellectual argument story, cool, then do that. But then you better know your political philosophy, and you better get into it, and say it your own way. That's the key. Do that work. That's what the audience is coming to it for. Otherwise, why are they coming to your story? They could just go to the original. You are bringing something. You are shaping it for them, and they want your understanding of it. Larry points out that if you consult you should consult a real lawyer and make sure it is at an official appointment so that this is all legal. That is good advice. There is a great deal of online, like producers and film websites will sometimes have like interviews with lawyers where they talk about these issues. One of the things they will always say is go talk to a real lawyer, but you'll get there's a lot of information out there. Okay. Oh, yes, I am with you on that. I even wrote a couple of damn fine scripts, movie scripts. So Serling, absolutely. I bow down to Rod Serling. Okay, so before I get to your question, Rachel, I'm going to continue on this. So the answer is, in general, don't put yourself in the position where you can be accused of taking something that doesn't belong to you, because other people's lives belong to them. Okay? If you are going to write your thoughts on their life, your feelings about their life, then that's your version. And you should be very thoughtful about how you do that, and especially about if you are doing it about someone you know who knows you, you want to think about what you are you saying something behind their back that you would not be saying to their face? If that person is a public figure, still the question is, why are you writing about that person in a fictional sense? If you want to write about them, write an essay. If you want to write a real story that involves a fictional person, figure out what the position is. Like in Lincoln, they worked on, from books about Lincoln, and they paid for the copyright to those books because those books had insights that were from that author. They weren't just Lincoln. It was other people's books about Lincoln steered them, and they paid for the rights to use that, because if you are using material about a public or historical figure, somebody wrote that, and they own those thoughts. So that is my first thing. Now let's get to Maratoletoso's question about names, because this is a fun name and a fun question and a good question. I'm going to read it pretty much straight. I understand that if I name a character Clint Eastwood, it's a bad idea, I could be sued. But can I mix something? For example, Clint Freeman or Morgan Eastwood. However, it is almost certain that there exists a real Clint Freeman or Morgan Eastwood. What happens in that case? Let's just stop there, because that's the first part of the question. And the answer is, when you make up a name, there is a good chance, there's like 7 billion people on this planet, your name is probably not totally free of somebody being real that way. So what I would say is, the first thing you do is, if you're really worried about it, Google that name. See who has that name. One of the keys to what they call legal clearance is, if there's one person who has that name, you're in trouble. If there's 50 of them, if you find that there's 50 Clint Freemans, you're a little freer because you're not referring to anyone in particular. The other thing is, if you have Clint Freeman and they live in Chicago and they're a lawyer, and you Google Clint Freeman and the only Clint Freeman lives in, Florida, and they're a dentist, that's a little better. So if you are accidentally using a name, make sure you're not also using the other identifying details about that person. However, the main thing about this is, if you were to get produced, which is the only time this really matters, the production company is going to have lawyers go through the whole script. That's part of production process is a thing called clearance. And they will clear every name and reference and anything else in the script to make sure that you have the legal right to use it. If you don't, they'll tell you and you'll have to change it. So worry about it then. You know, that's my feeling. When it comes down to like, am I using somebody's name coincidentally because there are a lot of people on the planet? Don't worry about it. If, however, then this is a great part, like twist on this. Is it possible to use a full name if it has a thematic sense to be the same name of a real person? For instance, my character is a super fan of Westerns, so he legally changed his name to Clint Eastwood. Or that fact is part of the story in some sense, or his parents are Western fans and they named him Clint Eastwood Smith. So anyway, that's great. And the answer would be, yeah, that's actually kind of cool as long as Clint Eastwood is a public figure and you are using them in the story as a public figure who is really them. In other words, you're no longer talking about Clint Eastwood. You're talking about somebody who named themselves after Clint Eastwood. That is as much as if they named themselves broccoli Brussels sprouts. Their name is then identifying them as using a thing from the world to identify themselves, and that's interesting as their character. You are not actually talking about Clint Eastwood anymore. You're talking about the iconic use of Clint Eastwood, and you probably could get away with that. It would certainly be worth trying because it's a character thing, and I, as you will know, I'm a big fan of character things. You should try and identify your characters with their actions, which includes choosing a name. So that is where we go on that. Let me quickly check some of the questions that have come up now because we got a couple of other things I want to run through. Tips. Hey, that's a good question. How to begin the process of fictionalizing something from your own life. Wow, that's great. Okay. I'm just sort of going off the top of my head here, and down the line I may do more videos about this. But the main thing is you want to take first of all, you want to take the essence of it. You don't want to, it depends. Like if you want to talk about, like I went to a creative arts summer camp in the 1970s. Now I could, what I want to do is think, what was the experience like for me, uniquely? What was important about it? Was it the freedom, the ability to be supported in creativity, the craziness of creative kids being packed together? Summer camps. Now, there's distinctive summer camp things. One of the things you can do to make this not exactly the thing is kind of, make a list of or write out the things you want to use that are specific and then specifically change them. The summer camp that I went to was called Bucks Rock Work Camp. It was great, by the way. It's still there for those of you who have teenagers who are creative and want to send them to probably an expensive summer camp, but a really good one. Anyway, the point is they had this big gong. It was made of a railroad wheel hung from a wooden frame, and they would hit it with a hammer, a sledgehammer, and it would make a noise you could hear for miles. You can't use that. That's Bucks Rock. Nobody's, there's too many people who have been to Bucks Rock and say, oh, I know about that gong. But think about it. Now maybe they have a broadcast system and they broadcast a certain tune or something. The point is you start to take your specifics and then specifically see what you can do with them. And I would say brainstorm. Brainstorming is a really good thing. So I'm going to point out, I did a whole video on that because the process of brainstorming means you try and get specific and then loosely just think of anything because who knows? So how to see it differently, then you get to, if it's like the essence of a person, a thing they did or a way they are, you put that in a very different person, think about, once again, the more specific you get, the more you can change things and get the energy of the specific into another thing. So therefore, the thing I would do is try and be real specific and honest with yourself about what you are taking from your own life. Don't be afraid in the privacy of your own work to really explore what you feel about them, what you know about them, what you think about them, whatever it is, and what they're like, and then take each thing and specifically start to rework it. Eventually, you will have reworked it, and those reworks will start to give you other creative thoughts, and that's when it starts to just actually change. Like it once you like if you're talking about somebody who is, you know, your mother, and you don't want it to make it that character's mother, but you want to talk about their authority over them. Maybe you put them in a boarding school and it's the head of the boarding school. Okay, you've gone a long way from mother, but the dynamic might be similar, depending on the mothering. But the point about that is once you've radically done that, then you start to think about the reality of a boarding school headmaster, mistress, and then you begin to think about the things you want to work with that, and pretty soon you've creatively reinvented them. There is room for memoiristic use of your real life. That's a fair thing to do. Just be aware of the consequences in those relationships you have. So that's my first note on that. Pablo, I'm going to get to yours in a second. Yes, every country has different laws. Absolutely. Yes, good point. Back to the Future Part 3 does use Clint Eastwood as a name because the character is using the iconic image of Clint Eastwood as a fake name. That's a good point. This is a related. Okay. It's too bad Maria is not here. Maria Spino is doing this exact thing. Sometimes if you want to write a script that shows your talent for like writing an episode of The Office or writing an episode of or a sequel to The Matrix using other characters, here's the problem. And this relates to another question we're going to get to. If you do that, you are saying to them, I am writing something that you only are reading as a sample of my writing, because we all know you can't make this. The problem is the people in Hollywood don't have enough time to read something that way. They don't, I mean, under very, very special circumstances, they will read somebody's script that is an episode of The Office. It used to be in the television business, that's how you got jobs. You were told every season, write a new script based on whatever the hot show is right now in your style. That is no longer true. Nobody wants you to do that anymore that I know of. You're better off writing an original script. And so I would advise against using IP. Maria had gotten herself involved with the actual Disney. There's a program in which they encourage fans to write essentially fan fiction for them so that they can sort of mine that for ideas. And so she was part of that program. But then she said, I just want to write this Star Wars script in order to practice, knowing full well it's just for practice. And she actually researched the legal ability to use it. So yes, it is doable, but you'd better be very, very clear on whether or not you're doing it for you or to show. If you are doing it to show, know that most people won't want to read it because you're wasting their time and they have so little free time to read. Like that script that you're giving them to read, that's one of 70 that they have to read in a weekend. So they're going to be just like blurry trying to read a section of something and then say, no, they're not going to bother reading the rest of that. So if they are reading something that they know is just a sample, they're not going to want to read it. So I would advise against that, unless you are purely doing it as practice, as learning the ropes for yourself, in which case, that's not a bad idea. That's kind of cool. Okay. Pavel, I'm going to get to yours after I get a couple more of the things I wanted to get done here. The first one is real quick. can I charge less than the WGA minimum for my script? I'm going to actually read this because it's just, I love this. Wilhelm wrote, can I sell my spec script for the TV for the price which is below WGA minimum? I'm not interested in money and I don't want to put the price on my art. That's what I love. I'm not interested in money and I don't want to put a price on my art. Damn, that's great. That is a healthy attitude. Cool. However, the problem is no, you can't. The Writers Guild minimums are anyone who works in the union. They present to the companies who are paying them as union minimums. You're not allowed to hire anyone in our union for less than this. And that's a way of protecting writers who might be desperate, just like you'd have a worker who would say, I'm so desperate for a job, I will take less than minimum wage because I'd rather have something than nothing. That leads to evil on the part of the employers because they're like, oh, well, this guy will do it for less. And then pretty soon you have people competing for less and less money. And that's horrible. So the Writers Guild, as a union, said, anybody in our union, you got to pay the minimum. The tricky thing about this is that every company that works in Hollywood has signed a deal with the union. In order to get union workers, they have to agree not to hire non-union workers because that's how unions work. That unions protect all the workers. They make sure that nobody is being paid too little for their work. It gets so tricky with artists because artists just want to get their work out there and they're like, don't pay me, don't worry about it. In the long run, that's not a good plan. That's really hard for artists to understand because you want to say, I just want a shot. Give me, take your studio and take my art. It's all cool. Unions protect you from that. It might seem like a bad deal, but it's not. And whether it is or is not doesn't matter because every single company that works for the primary industry distribution system of TV and movies, they have all signed that they will only work with union workers. So if you are working with any of those companies, they have to do the union price. So even if you would sell it for less, they can't buy it for less. You can work non-union and you can find a company that will do it and that will do it less. But honestly, for TV, that eventually they are going to have to get it onto a streaming service or onto a TV network, they're going to have to sign a union agreement. At that point, you get into the union. So that's the answer is, while you may want to go under the union minimums, once you get into the real professional system, no, you can't. You have to work on the union scale. When you are working non-union, that's more adjustable. And I would just say be very careful about the deal you make, because while you may not want to put a price on your art, somebody's going to be putting a price on that art and they'll be keeping all that money for themselves. And that's not fair because it's your art. So that's all. You could do it as a percentage. You could say, I want 10% of the gross, which means every dollar that comes in, I get 10 cents. So if you only make $1, cool, I'll just take the 10 cents. But if you make $1 billion, I want my 10% of that, which I don't know what that is. Okay. Finally, I just wanted to refer you to something before I get to Pavlo's questions. I want to talk about process, and I read an interview by a friend of mine, Howard Michael Gould. Howard Michael Gould has written, he's been a showrunner, he's written for TV, he's written plays, he has written movies, and he has written recently a series of novels. And the novels are about a detective who used to be a Los Angeles LAPD detective. He had a case go horribly wrong, and in his guilt, he withdrew from society and wanted to make no impact on the world. He wanted to have no negative impact, so he reduced his life down to only having 100 things. A spoon, a Kindle, whatever it is, there's only 100 of them. And if he gets a new one, he has to get rid of an old one. He can only have 100. It's his way of punishing himself, but also his way of not doing harm, because he feels so terrible about the harm he did while, as a detective, unthinkingly, he caused someone's terribly unfair death. So the point is that these books, Last Looks, which was made into a movie, which just came out, and then Below the Line and Pay or Play, they're terrific. When Pay or Play came out, Howard did an interview, and I will put the interview in the description of this this video. You can look down in the description. There will be a link to this interview because he said some really interesting stuff about what he calls pre-writes. And what he was talking about, he said, weirdly, as he became more successful, he became more frightened of writing. The more he was doing well, he had what he called page fright, which means just absolute panic at the fears that come to all of us when we are trying to write something. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of specifically messing up certain things. We all feel that, but we all kind of feel like, well, once I get paid and once I get professional and once I get rewarded, I certainly won't feel fear anymore. Not so. And if you think about the stories of writers and directors and musicians wrestling with the fact that even when they are famous, they often feel like they are going to screw up at any moment, and they do all sorts of terrible things to deal with that. Howard's way of dealing with that is really cool. He calls it pre-writes. He does a lot of them, and he describes the process in this interview with at a website called Writers and Authors. So he talks about basically as a way to deal with the page fright, the fear of writing in every sense, he has these steps, many of which I've sort of described as my process too, of asking questions, of thinking things out, of writing out. He basically writes an outline that's almost half as long as the script or the book will be. Anyway, I just want you to know that'll be in the description. I'll put it in after this is over, and you can link to that, and I highly recommend reading it because it's a good read, and it's really thought-provoking as to, oh, that would fix that. That would help. All right. So let's do some quick questions and then we must move on. But I'm going to run a little long today because you've got all of a sudden everyone's asking questions. So here goes. Pavlo, Pavlo saved me before, so I owe him. What advice would you give to a new writer with full-time job? Shared some stories with the people in the industry, but every time I started, okay. This is cool because I've got tons of advice about this. I am the specialist in this. All right. The first thing I would suggest is this video. Create a ritual. I am a big believer in if you work on your process of writing, if you don't put any of your pressure onto the project, you get used to the process, you will get the project. I also did a video which I don't have the thumbnail for offhand called Fear of Writing. So please watch that because it's really right on the nose there. Fear of writing. And it happened while I was writing with a full-time job. So I would just urge you to look at these videos. The first is called Create a Ritual. Then I would talk about small steps and use what you have. I mean, I got to say, honestly, everything on my site, the ones that have those thumbnails that are just a straight out, this is a lesson on this topic, process of questions, outlining, they will all help with the terrible problem of having to work in small bits or in your off hours. Also, my Film Courage interviews, if you want, there's a bunch of those. I talk a lot about that in those. But the main thing is go through my videos, my how-to videos, all the ones under Screenwriting Essentials and especially Tools and Skills and the process, being a writer. All of those have advice on this topic. All right, let's get down to, is it better for a first-time writer to submit a high-concept script or should it be more low-concept and character-focused? There is no better there. Ideally, actually, what you want is a high-concept high-concept script that has really great characters, honestly. The question of high budget or low budget depends on what you're trying to do with a script. If you write a high concept script that's expensive, you are saying, I want the industry to make this, and I am willing to submit to the process and realities of working in the industry. If you write, when you say low concept, I think you mean low budget, because like high concept, it actually means a very hooky idea that you can say in one sentence. That's what high concept originally meant when that phrase showed up in the 80s. High concept is an idea where it doesn't matter if the movie's any good because the idea is so hooky. Oh, an alligator becomes president. Boom, I want to watch that. Or, you know, Die Hard on a boat. Whatever it is, it's something that you can say in one, and people understand the genre and the plan, and they're going for it because simply of the log line. That's what high concept is. But if you're talking about high budget, if you're talking about expensive, big Hollywood type movies, then you're saying, I am going to then put myself into the sausage making factory of dealing. That just doesn't get bought and made. There's an immense amount of negotiations. Different people have different wants. You have to rewrite it 1,000 times, and you have to be willing to put up with that. If you want to just write something and just show how good you are with just the bare minimum, learn about low budget or no budget, as they call it, ultra indie DIY film. If you do that, the cool thing is A, if you're interested in directing, you can do it. And B, if you're not, you've opened it up to all those people who only want to get something done and are willing to work offbeat ways or for no money. Whereas which means if something is unusual, then anything that's unusual is hard to sell. So it removes that problem because you don't have to sell it. You can just get it made. So that's the high budget, low budget choice. It's not that you will, you write them differently because they have different requirements physically. You only have a certain number of locations and actors and time and stuff like that. But is it better? It depends. If you want to write a script that will most likely get thrown into the pile and may be noticed, then write the high budget. If you want to write one where you can probably get, at very least try and get somebody to make it, but no one will ever make any money and you won't get famous and you won't get anything else from it except the satisfaction of doing it and showing it at a film festival, do that. That's the reality of it. I've done both. And I can tell you that the satisfaction comes from making the choice of what you want to do and feeling good when you write a script that doesn't get made, but somebody liked. That's what happens with high budget, is that you might, if you're at the ultimate praise of a high budget script is mostly that you get somebody who says, yeah, I can't make this script, but I like your writing. Let's talk. That is what you write a high budget script for. If you write a low budget script, you write it because you can have the satisfaction of getting it made, but people won't take it as seriously if all they care about is Marvel movies, because it's a little no budget thing with not real actors. But that's okay if you know what you're doing. I have to tell you, the satisfaction of doing low budget is very powerful if you like those movies. If you don't like those movies, don't do it. Okay. Yes, I am very much a union member. I am a member of the Writers Guild of America, the Writers Union. I am currently, having been a member of the Writers Guild for 25 years, I am finally retired and living on my union pension from all the money that I paid in during those 25 years I was working as a union member. So therefore, I'm a big fan of unions because they protected me and they gave me health benefits and they made sure that when I was willing to pay to take no money, they were like, no, these people have big fancy offices and big fancy cars. They're going to pay you a decent amount. So cool. If you want more information, go to wga.org. That is where everything about the union is there. Writers Guild of America, that's my union. Fear of writing video is brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to get that. Okay, well, let's ban that bot and say thank you to Show Don't Tell and thank you, Pavlo. And so, yeah, next time I will have the fear of writing thumbnail here, but fear of writing. It's a great title. Red. It's a red thumbnail. Go look for it. And in the meantime, tomorrow I'm going to get back to working on the step-by-step project. And in the meantime, I hope all of you go write something.